Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our second Radio Month webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to be joined by Ravi Naidoo today, who'll be sharing all things on the future of radio. But before that, I'm going to hand it over to Executive Director Nadia Bulbulia to make the opening remarks and welcome all of us.
Thanks, Afense. Thank you so much and welcome, Ravi. And of course, members, most importantly, welcome. It's great that you can join us this morning. February is the month of everything radio. And we know some of you, managed to join us for our previous webinar. And so it's great that you're joining us today. One of the key kind of mandates for the NAB, as you know, is about knowledge building, knowledge sharing, capacity building, training and development. And we take this very seriously. We're also on this journey of engaging with senior, seasoned professionals and experts like Ravi. And Ravi has so many titles. Ravi, I was just looking at your online footprint as one does. And you've been called the Creative Chief Officer, which was a role you held at some stage, obviously station manager. But what I loved really was your the title Programming Guru. Of course, for all of us, you are a pioneer, you are a leader. And I think the most exciting thing is that you've always been passionate about radio. And your journey, just having a chat with you last year with you and the team, I think we're all just in awe in terms of your personal journey. So today, as you are part of the NAB family and part of this engagement session, we're looking forward to just hearing your thoughts, your experiences. We know you've been traveling quite a bit. And it's really about your learnings and about you being with us this morning. So thank you for your time. Thank you to all our members. As I said, we've been living in this online space for the longest time now. So we really would appreciate some reactions. Use those emojis, people. We like smiles, we like applauses, and we love hearts. But it's really an open engagement, and we really want to feel the energy as well. Feel free to also use the chat line, but I'm sure Ravi is going to have a lot of interesting and provocative things, I think, as well to share. So thanks so much. And Offensive will facilitate if there are any questions, and just a huge, warm, welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nadia. Ravi, I'll now hand it over to you. And just like Nadia said, it's very interactive, so feel free to leave your comments and questions in the chat box. And then there'll also be a short Q&A session at the end. So over to you now, Ravi.
So has radio become formulaic, become too predictable? Why do clients and brands not understand what it goes to make it gets to making great radio? How do I keep my relevance? How do I keep my resonance if I'm a radio presenter and a producer? Why is there a lack of radio talents behind the scenes? I can't find programmers, I can't find producers, I can't find content programmers. And my program manager or my station manager doesn't give me enough time and feedback. Those are some of the questions that I've been asked in the last year. And I wish I had all the answers, because I don't. And I think that's why we're going to have this talk today. So firstly, Nadia, Offense, and the team, thank you for allowing me to get into the NAB family and to talk to some of my former colleagues and some of my friends in the industry. So greetings, everybody. Also, Offense, thank you for finding the picture of me that was from 20 years ago. So if anybody rocked up here today looking for that guy, unfortunately, I'm 20 years older. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I know it's been dubbed the future of radio. And Flip, I hope I had all those answers to that provocative question, because I don't. And I think that in itself is probably where we need to as an industry. And I'm going to throw something out, actually, which I think is something that I've witnessed on the journey on, connecting with, I think, a lot of local people, international people. And I want to talk right about the power of radio, okay? And what I think some of the things that stay true to what we still do and should be doing, and some of the, kind of experiments and some of the strategy and innovation I think we need to start looking at. So, that's what I want to focus on today. And like Offense and Nadia said, this is interactive, okay? So this is not me delivering a sermon or a presentation of what I think it should be. This is about me saying, these are my observations, and, let's have a conversation. And I know it's not going to be contained to this, but I think it's about, as an industry, how we've got to build a narrative of what I certainly think is what I call the 5 C's, okay? So the journey, I think, on answering some of these questions, I think lies in the power of us, okay? Us as an industry. And I think this is probably the biggest nugget that I've noticed, particularly in the United Kingdom and in Australia, which are two markets that we tend to somehow find a bit of a mixture and a mold of those markets. I think Australia is quite adventurous and experimental in a lot of space. I think London has really matured as a market, and commercial radio and community radio is quite powerful there. So I spent some time with some of the radio people there, and I think the time now is probably for the radio industry to galvanize together. Okay. And in the absence, I know, of the data and data points that help the programmers and help the advertisers, collaboration, in my view, is probably the biggest thing I think the radio industry needs to focus on. Okay. So, looking at the journey that I've been on, so spending time in corporate radio, which I've learned immensely from. And I've always operated of the view that you're never too old to unlearn and relearn. And just when you think you know everything, or sorry for you, there's something new around the corner. Okay. And some of the most powerful ideas, and this is my message to some of the program managers, station managers, CEOs of the groups. Most often, some of the greatest ideas actually come from within your organization, and they say the greatest ideas sit actually right under your nose. Okay, so sometimes we search for these answers, but they actually sit within our environment, and I think we need to be more open-minded about how we go about doing this. So, as I do this, I'm going to use a typical radio analogy to try and segue into my presentation. So if you just give me a second, I'll pull up this preso. So the power of radio, and as I mentioned, I think it's all about galvanizing and coming together. And what I've done is, and this is just my view, so please, this is what my observations are based on, kind of the conversations that I've had with, different kind of people in the industry, be it local or be it international. And the one thing that I have to say, and Nadia, you made this point when you started, I think the passion for radio and the passion for audio is probably, I think, at its highest level. I think there's a lot of lack of support and a lot of guidance. And I think that's what the industry needs from a focus perspective. And it's about talent development. Now, I just want to qualify this here. And, when you have a lot of conversations, people think that talent, it only goes to on-air talent. And that's one myth and misnomer that I'm going to dispel straight away. Talent is anybody that contributes to the power of radio. That could be somebody who puts together a radio schedule, a radio producer, digital producers. I mean, it could be the tea lady in a radio station, because it's about building this environment that all contributes to what comes out the power of the speaker. So, I think as a industry, I think we owe it to give people the guidance and the support. And I know that's Nadia, that's a cause that I know that you're championing as the NAB. But often I think, we spend the time and development on the wrong areas, right? And I believe that and I put it down to the 5 C's. And the 5 C's, I believe, is down to collaboration. And I'll unpack that a bit. It's about connection. It's about community. It's about curiosity. And I think courage is a huge factor that needs to come into how we try and get. And I'll call it not the future of radio, but how we kind of really galvanize the basics of the power of radio. And then how do we play and how do we experiment in this space? So I went to 2 radio festivals in the UK. And, often when you lift your head up and you see other environments, it's not necessarily about the idea. Sometimes it's about the approach. And it's always about also just picking up little nuggets and saying, is this going to be relevant for our markets? Is it going to land? Is it something that we're gonna try from that perspective? Okay. So the line that I want to steal from the Radio Centre in the UK, who do incredible work for commercial radio, and the BBC obviously runs from a content perspective, not necessarily commercial, is about seeing radio differently. Okay, that's their tagline. So what they do is they spend a lot of time working with the media owners, working with the radio industry, clients and brands, and going, how do we position radio differently? Okay, because radio has changed. Between all the social platforms, the ability to kind of do activation and events, the ability to do digital, all of these different facets don't unfortunately are not being displayed consistently by the brands. And I know everybody's coming at it at their own, but I'm going to say this here, and it might be taken differently, but I'll say it anyway because I hold no affiliation to any particular organization. I'm passionate about radio, but I think it's about time that I think the egos get put in the back pocket and the radio industry comes together and says, guess what? We have one common goal. We all have to increase our audience. We all have to generate a response and a result, and we all got to commercialize it. I think there's enough money on the table. There's enough audience for everybody to enjoy, but we're kind of doing it in our own pockets. Okay. And that's one thing that came out glaringly in some of the visits that I've had, where everyone goes at it to say, how do we build the category and the platform of radio? And what you had is at the so firstly at the radio festival, which is the RAB, and you can see there on the left, they drive three pillars: innovation, which goes about reach, and that's about the different platforms. Connection is how do we build that connection and make sure that we are keeping the local, live local, but we also have the global feel. And most importantly, and I think my message to, if there's any radio talent on this call, to station managers, program managers, clients, is we have to be fixated on response and result. And response and result is not only commercially only, it's to know that if we're putting out content there, it's actually landing, right? And is it landing with the right audience? And then can we commercialize it, So I think whether you live in the space of public radio, commercial radio, I believe the time is now for us to stand together to kind of really sharp as an industry. That's the biggest, the most common theme that I picked up. And, like I said, in the mature markets, they've tried things and some have worked and some haven't worked. And I think we've also got to be a bit brave and have the courage to do that. So I'm going to share some of that insights with you. And I'm not going to be talking for all of the next 15, 20 minutes or how long are we going to go for. I have enlisted some friends. I've got the likes of Chris Fade, who's a good friend of mine for the last 15 years. He's a breakfast show host in Virgin Radio Dubai. Some of you might know Grant Nash, who used to be a presenter and is now a media consultant. And Stephen Werner, who used to head up KFM in Cape Town, who now lives in Australia. And they're going to share some insights of what I believe are the 5 C's. So the first one being collaboration, and I've touched on that. I think we've got to really, as an organization, work together to try and really build collaboration. I think the rules don't apply anymore, right? And some rules don't apply. And I said, I'll use this within an organization. I think within the structures of a typical radio station, you have programming and you have a content team and you have a commercial team and you have an ops team and you have all these different teams that link in together. And I think still very much people live in their silos and being able to say, I will only look at the content and I will only look at commercial. And I think we've got to challenge the roles that sit in stations and have people really integrate and collaborate together. Okay. And that's my advice to, I think, the teams within media organizations is how do you show up and how do you make sure that you're really challenging presenters, producers, programming teams to think of ideas that can be commercialized, that builds the category of radio and builds community. And vice versa, how do you get commercial teams to be thinking, is this campaign going to be driving a good audience metric that talks about the audience, okay? Or am I just trying to close the sale? And I think that collaboration starts firstly within an organization. It then goes out to the broader, radio industry to say whether we sit as commercial, campus, or community or public radio, can we work together to grow a category or a sector of radio that we want to drive? And that is something that the UK particularly have done really well. So on this radio center, which is the organization in the UK that is driven around driving case studies, I saw the breakfast show of 3 radio stations that sat there. They spoke about what drives their particular shows. They spoke about how clients can integrate into their content. They then had clients come and display case studies that said, when we went about this, we had our objective. We then went across to the radio station and to the media owner, and we said, this is what we want to do, and we co-created it. So the theme of converged, the theme of co-creating and certainly collaboration is the strongest that I've seen it ever being displayed, particularly in the UK and in Australia. And you'll hear from people like Stephen and Chris about how important that is. Okay, so collaboration is the first C out of my fives that I think are my 5 C's that I think is really important. The second one is about connection. Okay, and fun fact here, which is people are twice as happy when they listen to radio. And I think as radio people and people that live in it, I think we often forget the power of what this platform can do. And we only see it when we run something like an initiative, be it community, be it a campaign or an event. But we need to be reminded that every single day, we play a very important part of a human connection to people who sit in their cars, in taxis and on their way to work, or who look at the power of the humanness about what radio plays. Okay, and you'll see on your right hand side there's an aspect about laughter and humor and fun, and people look to radio, and this is whether it's talk radio, whether it's music radio, whether it's campus community. We are the escapism for them. Okay, so our role is to consistently show up every single day and to make sure we go about doing that. Okay, so with that, I want to segue into Grant Nash. Grant used to be on 5FM, was a presenter with me, with Anela at 947, now works very closely with community radio, campus radio, and also does a lot of work with brands about how to build human connection. Okay, so Grant's going to talk to you about what he calls the dose effect. And I do hope that the audio has been selected. So here we go.
So what if I told you that we could increase our advertisers' effectiveness by between 30 and 50%? Literally 30 and 50%, simply by evoking positive emotions and positive emotional states in our audiences. That's right. That's what the science says to us. It says to us that by deliberately engineering the right neurochemicals in our listeners' brains, we can create the perfect condition for audience engagement, for brand loyalty, and ultimately for advertisers' success. And of course, this is cool because we're not just selling, we're also serving our audience, right? And so if we evoke these particular neurochemicals that I'm going to speak about today, it's going to trigger our audience being happier. It's going to enhance their daily lives. Hello, everyone. I'm Grant Nash. Good to see you all. Today, we're going to speak about something I like to call the dose effect in radio. And what we're looking to do here is we're looking to look at our content and say to ourselves, okay, cool. How can we create the environment where our audience feels really good? And if they feel really good, then we're going to help our advertisers sell more stuff, literally. And so we're going to call it the dose effect. It comes from a neuroscientist. His name is TJ Power, and he uses this dose effect, and I like to use the dose effect in radio. The dose stands for DOSE, and it's 4 neurochemicals that we're going to look at, and we're going to look at 20 ways in which we can evoke those neurochemicals. And those chemicals are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And when we speak from a psychological perspective, we kind of say that these are the happy hormones. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to start with dopamine. So dopamine is the reward and the motivation neurotransmitter. So it comes from anticipation and achievement and excitement. So this is helping your listeners get hooked and engaged on your show. So here are some ideas. So one of the things that we know we're really good at, and that's creating competitions and rewarding audiences in little games and little things that we play to make them feel like they have a sense of accomplishment. So when they play along to a game and they get the answer right, they feel really good. That's a dopamine hit. When they win something, that's a dopamine hit. Play games. Chris Moyles used to say, when they asked him how he became the savior of Radio 1, and I think he had like 10 million new listeners in a year, he said, I played games. And that's what you can do. So these little competitions, these little rewards that you can give your audience, really good. Then listen, this is why a promise, a tease, a throw forward is so important. This is why these little cliffhangers that we used to be really good at, that we're not so good at anymore, are really important, because it brings out a sense of anticipation. The moment you have the sense of anticipation, you're going to fire up your audience's dopamine. And remember, there are 2 types of teasers. We call it a vertical tease and a horizontal tease. Vertical tease, what's coming up next? Horizontal tease, what's coming up tomorrow? End those things on cliffhangers. TV does this so well. We don't do this well enough. This is going to fire up that dopamine. It's going to fire up that anticipation. Then A great way to do this is to start to get your audience into some sort of goal-orientated triggered mode. So trigger this goal-orientatedness. And how do we do this? Think about like personal challenges that you can do, goals that you can do with them. What about like, I don't know, wake up at 5 a.m. challenge, the try something new Thursday challenge, get your audience to be a part of that with you. Any of these little diet challenges, go on a quest with your audience, get them moving in a goal-oriented direction. This is going to fire up that dopamine. Now, I know this sounds a little bit cheesy, a little bit old school, but trust me, shout outs and recognition, man, the moment you mention someone's name, boom, dopamine. And this is exactly the same on radio. The moment you mention somebody's name. And also, interestingly enough, we also get this effect from hearing other people's names, hearing other people getting acknowledged. So I know that it's kind of old school, but it works really, really well. And then don't be afraid to start to bring in a lot more of this behind the scenes content, the sneak peek, this like, I got a little secret for you, you'll never guess. We went backstage too, we had this artist in and this is what he did. So when you bring your audience into these little behind the scenes sneak peek little things, this fires up the dopamine. It makes them feel like they're in this sort of exclusiveness. Oh, it's something that I know that other people don't know. Oh, that's the dopamine busy firing up. Okay, so that's the D for dopamine. Now let's talk oxytocin. Oxytocin they call the love hormone. This is kind of like the connection, the trust hormone. And it's fueled by belonging, by trust, by emotional connection. So interestingly enough, there are two of the main ways in which we get oxytocin. One of them is when we give birth, and I don't know about you, but I can't do that. So it's a little bit difficult for me to fire up that oxytocin, but it's also when we love. So when we hug someone, when we look someone in the eye, when we hold their hand, we get this flow of oxytocin. You can kind of do the same thing from a radio perspective. So I want you to think of it as that, making radio feel like home, making it feel special, making it feel like a big hug. So again, a little bit old school, but the moment you put someone on the air, the moment you have live callers on the air, the moment you share stories from people, the moment you make them feel like they're part of a tribe, the moment you have those voices on the air. And this is why I get voice notes. I get why you use them, but every now and again, get that caller, get that person on the air, speak to them. It's going to make them feel good. It's going to make your audience feel good. Then listen, any of these good news segments that exist, tell us something good today. Tell us something good that's happening in your life. Tell me about these small wins. Let's celebrate those. Are you celebrating these small wins in your audiences? Are you uplifting them? Are you building connection? Are you spreading positivity? This is the oxytocin that's going to do that. Surprise phone calls to audiences. I heard a radio station in the UK the other day doing this, and it just blew me away at how impactful it is. I know it sounds a bit dumb, but or not dumb, a little bit old school still, but what they do is they literally have like a random person they phone to say thank you for being a listener. Or they read like a little letter from an audience member to them. So thanking a mom, thanking a whatever. It's beautiful. It works. It fires up that oxytocin. Use your social media to connect with your audiences. So, you are using WhatsApp. You should be using WhatsApp. The more you use WhatsApp, the more you use these voice notes. That's going to be helpful. Do that. And then again, sounds a bit old school, but like the moment you have a little dedication from one person to another, maybe it's a song, maybe it's a love song, look at bringing those back in. That's going to get that oxytocin flowing, that connection, and those trust hormones. So those are easy ways in which to do that. Let's speak about serotonin now. Okay, serotonin is the confidence and the well-being neurotransmitter, and it regulates mood, it regulates self-esteem, it regulates overall happiness. It just gives your audience a real good mental boost. And the ways in which we drive up serotonin is feel good news. So any uplifting story is going to fire up that serotonin. So the moment you can find some positive news out there, get that into your audience's ears, it's going to uplift them. Also empowering conversation. So anytime, we often think that when we do funny, we can't do empowering, and that's not necessarily true. So any conversation, really useful, inspiring conversations, empowering conversations, that's going to help a lot. Maybe like a life advice, for example, from a listener or for listeners, from listeners, with listeners, Wisdom Wednesday. I don't know, it sounds cheesy, but it works. Then gratitude. Gratitude is a real good way to bring serotonin in. And gratitude is just a fantastic way to make people a little bit happier. In positive psychology, we call it the low-hanging fruit of positive psychology, gratitude. So ask listeners to reflect on something they're grateful for. This helps. And then nostalgia, nostalgia, nostalgia. Anything that has a little bit of a throwback. So think about music, think about TV shows, think about all of that kind of stuff. Whoo, the serotonin just gets powered up. Okay, let's then finally look at endorphins. So endorphins are the natural pain and stress relievers. So this is, again, reducing stress, it boosts energy, and it creates joy. And you know how you get endorphins? One of them is by laughing. So friends, funny, 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 and more funny. Funny works. Funny works. If you're funny, if you make them laugh, you know that, right? And part of it is because the endorphins just fire up. Music that makes people move. So even if you are a soft AC station, even if you do soft music, if you can find then and ring fence anything that gets people up, gets people going, gets them excited, gets this heart beating, it's going to drive up the endorphins. And then I know it sounds cheesy, but can you get your audience to move? So can you find a way to get them to stretch, to get them to do a little workout in the morning, to get them to do something? The moment you do that, the endorphins are going to start flowing. Feel Good Friday, fun and spontaneous. So maybe we do a Feel Good Friday that it's filled with, I don't know, dedicated to silly, light-hearted, funny segments, a lot of fun stuff that could really help. And then surprise and delight. So any surprise and delight is going to drive up those endorphins. Okay, so there we go. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. I hope that you can find a way to bring these into your show, find a way to get your audience to feel these particular things. These are the happy hormones. Why do you want to do this? Because when people are at their happiest, they're more receptive to our messaging. So from an advertiser's perspective, if we can get them into that frame of mind, we can sell them stuff. So we want to do that. We want to power that up. And I hope that this was a beneficial 10 minutes to you.
Grant Nash, you beautiful soul. That was incredible. And I mean, don't you love his passion? I mean, his passion that he's got, Grant, is absolutely incredible. So I think he speaks to a lot of what I was referring to, which was about the feel-good positive factor, laughter. I mean, you saw the piece about laughter, and it's about light and shade. And I think, the next piece I'm gonna show you is about how do you bring the light and shade with your content, and whether this is content on air, whether it's content that sits in the digital space. But I think Grant touched on some really cool points there. Nothing actually these days beats the power of a live caller. And I think it was actually, I know he's not on the call, but certainly he's still involved in radio. Zane Derbyshire, who I used to work with at Prime Media many years ago, and who's had a great role at many stations in South Africa. And Zane posted this actually a couple of weeks ago, and I think he's so on point about this. What voice notes have done is actually made a lot of producers and presenters lazy, because they get cut up and they get used as a long audio piece. And what it does is actually just removes the connection of the presenter with the listener. And a live caller gives you a story. And even if they fluff or they do, they kind of, that's okay, because that's how life is. And I think being able to use those callers or those voice notes and turning them into a caller, I think is actually far more beneficial in that space. So thank you, Grant. And by the way, if you guys want me to share that with you, happy to share that piece. I think what Grant has gone is quite an interesting journey. And this is probably a nugget for some of the program and the content managers on the call, is that your role as a content and program manager now is far more than formatics. Okay. Yes, an ability to plan a link, but it's actually about coaching and developing the talent. And Grant is spending a lot of time with corporates, brands, because it's about EQ, and it's about ability to kind of grow what you call the human skills. I don't like the word soft skills. I think human skills is far more impactful. So as a content and a program manager, you've got to be fixated on how do you keep your talent. And the talent, once again, is on air and off air. And how do you build that balance between the light and shade? And how do you manage their characters, personalities, and egos off air that actually lands better on it? And that goes to creating the environment and coaching them and developing them. So I'm going to move on to one of my good friends, there's a guy called Chris Fade. And this piece actually, and a shout out to the Gagazi and the Heart people on the call. Did some work with them last year. And Chris is a good friend of mine from Virgin Radio in Dubai. And Chris went to Dubai 15 years ago, and this is a case study of how to keep resonance, relevance, and resilience in a marketplace. And he went there as an unknown, in a market where radio was developing, certainly commercial radio, and he took over the breakfast show. And he's going to share some of his experience about being authentic, being real, and making sure you've got the human connection. So this is Chris Fade, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, Gagazi FM, Heart FM, what's going on? It's Chris Fade. Hope you're well. I was going to do this video from our studio. However, this whole video is about being authentic and real. And I'm sitting in my car and I thought, well, I'm going to just do it right here. I think I want to keep it as real as possible. I've been doing radio for about 20 years right now. Started off in Australia, sort of moved to Dubai and helped build Virgin Radio Dubai. And, you know, God's blessed me. I've had the #1 show around this way for nearly the past 14 years. We're syndicated across the world as well in certain countries. But I guess, you know, you guys asked me to talk about more sort of, I guess, the authenticity side of radio. And I think one thing that the show that I do with my co-host Pretty and Rossi, and we've been together for nearly 15 years, is we're authentic. We share our lives and we try to be as real as we possibly can. It's not about being self-indulgent and just talking about yourself, but it's telling stories possibly that is happening in your life that relates to the audience and then getting their views on it. And we try to do that every single day. And some of it's real. When I talk about being authentic, I talk about things that I've discussed. You know, I've gone through a divorce and I talked about that divorce, you know, on the radio. I talked about going through anxiety and depression on the radio. And you know what that does, I'm all about human connection. And when you can connect with that one listener, that one time, you will forever have them tuning into your show. So depending on what type of show that you guys are doing, just try to get that connection with your audience. And that's not only just on air. We live in a world of social media, so trying to get that social media connection, reply to your DMs, reply to those messages that come in. Try to get relatable content that's happening on air to be relatable on social media. We do reshoot a lot of the content sometimes that we're doing on the radio, but we reshoot it in another way just for social media because we know it's going to pop a different way on social media. So I think that's what it's really about. But, you know, it's not easy. People think it's easy. There's a fine line between, you know, having an ego and not having an ego. And that's something that I found in radio a lot. You know, at the end of the day, we're blessed to be able to get behind a microphone and do what we get to do. Don't take it for granted. Count it as a blessing. Every day I walk into that studio and I count it as a blessing. And I do all I possibly can to remain #1 with our team. We're a family. We're a unity. We all know our darkest secrets of one another, but we're all there for each other. So have fun in that studio. Have fun in that studio and try to be as real as you possibly can. Don't get into radio trying to be famous, funny, or to make money. If you try any of those three, it ain't going to happen.
Some great words from Chris Fade from Virgin Radio Dubai. And I think it goes back to some of the key basics in 101, you know, which is about being real, authentic, talking to one listener, making sure that the content that sits on air versus that sits online can have a different treatment. And I think that's the mistake I think I've noticed in having conversations with some of the, you know, both local and international people, is that we tend to have this kind of spray and pray approach. We put the content on air, share it on social media and hope that it's going to pop. You've got to tailor your content for the platform. So that was about human connection. I think the next C for me is about community. And when I say community, I think a lot of people default to where they think it's just about community initiative and doing good and CSI and CSR and kind of fundraisers. That's one element out of community, right? And yes, it's important. It's got to go to the brand pillar of most brands. And whether, like I said, your campus community, you know, public radio, it's our responsibility as radio to make sure we look after our community. But we've got to also do it in a purposeful way. But we've also got to build communities that we can, #1, build and they get to trust us, but also we can commercialize down the line. And I think that is the nugget that I picked up in the UK particularly, is around they build communities of interest that sits within the pillars. And you know, the BBC are very good at that. I know they're not commercial, but they drive a specific community that they build. It might be about lifestyle, it might be about music. So I did attend one of the talks with Scott Mills, who's one of the presenters on Radio 2. And his big driver is about sharing authentic experiences. And he had a presenter on the end. They spoke about kind of mental wellness. And that was building a community about lifestyle and wellness. So that's when I refer to communities. I think stations are going to be fixated about how do we build both the purpose and then these kind of communities, because what it does do, it offers clients an entry point back into your ecosystem. So that's about community. And you can see, some of the nuggets that were shared in the UK. It's power to shape and influence community. And radio holds a very special place. As Grant said, and as Chris said, we are part of their lives. That's how they kind of live their lives every single day. The last two is about curiosity and courage. And what curiosity is about, you've got to think when you're doing content is what else can I do? And that goes to the platform, but it also goes to, a good example around this is about interviews. A lot of interviews I hear is around, we'll just get an artist in, or we'll get an interviewee in, and we just kind of ask the same questions that you can find across if you searched online or you watched a YouTube video. We don't work hard enough to make that interview a bit more unique and also interesting for the interviewee. And I actually had the pleasure of sitting in with Chris on one of his shows, and he had a guest in there. Firstly, from the time that the guest came in and the treatment of that guest evoked, number one, that the guest felt comfortable, but through that conversation, they picked up a lot of nuggets that kind of then took the interview in a slightly different way. So curiosity is really important when it comes to creating content. And think about, how do I find 3 dimensions when I'm doing the content? And like I said, it could be between on air and between the platforms. It might be a stunt that gets them out there. And all of these things positions the radio as different, see radio differently. So curiosity, I think, is more of a culture trait that I think program managers, station managers, and environments need to create, because when these conversations happen with producers, presenters, and the talent, it's about, cool, we want to do that, but how do we kind of make this pop? So curiosity for me is about, I think, a culture and an ethos. And I want to cross over to the land down under, to a good friend of mine, Stephen Werner. Some of you might know him. Stephen used to be at KFM and is now living in Adelaide, who works for ARN. And Stephen actually talks about some of this, which is, how do we push ourselves? How do we make sure we remain curious for the power of radio? Stephen Werner, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Ravi. It's Stephen Werner here. For those of you who don't know me, I am ex-KFM. Used to be the station manager for KFM, was a producer at the station, worked in talk radio on Cape Talk and did some work on 702. And now I'm in Australia and working across the KISS network. Got a great privilege to get this opportunity to come and work across the KISS network and living in Oz. What an exciting time for radio, a bit of a scary time for some people. And Ravs and I have worked together for many, many years. We go way back, and we worked together across the music radio network with KFM and 947. And today, Ravs has asked me just to pop in and chat to you about the future of radio, particularly at a time like this, and how we future-proof radio at a time like this. And I've got a couple of points that I thought we'd cover off that I believe, in my experience and in what I do, are critical to the success of a station. So I think the first thing is not forgetting the basics. As teams get smaller, as loads get bigger on everybody's shoulders, as commercial strains get larger and pressure around ratings increase, it's really important to do 2 things. Never forget about your audience, who they are, what they want. Don't get carried away with what you think is great, that's fun to do, but not fun to listen to or fun to be part of. And don't forget to remember to stick to your strategy. Define your strategy with your team, surround your team, support your teams, make sure everyone is clear on it, buys into it, has their part to play where they can impact it and influence it in a way that gives them ownership, and plan and execute that strategy consistently. So that's really, really important to me, is remembering the basics. Content planning is critical, planning ahead, not just for the audience and for yourselves, but also for commercials. So planning ahead so that you know what you're doing, to the point where you give it enough time, your content enough time to breathe and to create extensions and to turn content into moments, to create moments that people talk about, to grow your audience and to be memorable. And then also a long enough lead time so that commercial can sell your concepts where there's a commercial opportunity and enable your vision for content. Taking commercial along with you. We can't do this without the commercial teams. I'm not saying bastardize the stations, but what I am saying, and what I can tell you is, if you've got commercial on your side and you collaborate, you will win and you will have the money and the resources to do all those things you want to do that you complain you never have money to do or that you never get to do. And getting better every day is really important. Don't forget the basics around monitoring or listening to your station, air checking. It's a lost art. It's the best way to improve your station. If you want to improve 1% every day, give your team 2 or 3 things to focus on until they master those things, move on to the next things. Give them deadlines, give them timelines, and use monitoring and listening. Play them the audio as a way of improving. Give feedback. Don't be afraid to give feedback. Do it in the right way and do it in an encouraging way where you take a coach approach to make your talent better, to make your teams better, and encourage teamwork. So that's really important. Those are the basics that I think are really important. What about the future, right? So staying relevant. The Australian landscape, as many of you would have seen, has changed significantly over the past year to 2 years. As I said before, always ask what else? How can I make this even bigger? How can I make this moment even more memorable? How can I stick out where everybody is doing the same thing and everyone sounds so similar? It's the same talent going up and down the road, doing the same bits. What's the scariest movie you've seen? What was your date gone wrong? Tell us about the thing that your kid did at school or brought home from school. Everyone's doing the same topics, but how can you do phoners or interviews in a way that no one else can do? How are you going to create headlines and make the headlines this week? Be bold, be brave, and disrupt is part of that. So be bold. Do something that no one else would do. Stop down the playlist. Stop playing music for 30 minutes because you're going to keep taking contestants until you give the cash away. Break the rules here and there in a responsible way. Do things to create noise and get people to notice you. You're not just competing with other radio stations, you're competing with entertainment, you're competing with YouTube, you're competing with everything else that people are using to distract themselves from their daily lives as entertainment and escape. Audio, how are you generating revenue from audio? It's not just about FM. How are you selling and your streams, your podcasts? How are you building in sub-sponsorships? Do you have an opportunity to bring sponsorships into breakfast in a new way and bring sponsorships in to sponsor your video content for breakfast, to unlock sub-sponsorships and get more clients involved in the show in a meaningful way that aligns to their strategy as well as yours? What about other streams in your apps? 80 streams, 90 streams. What about using your personalities to create playlists that you can sell? Think about anything you can sell without compromising your product. And sometimes you do have to compromise your product because it's for the greater good. Collaboration is really important. If there's one thing influencers, and I hate that word, but the one thing that influencers have taught us, if you don't collaborate, you die. And the world is about collaboration. It is the way of the world. It's the way that we work together to have the power to create noise, to get attention, and to have impact. And if you don't have impact, you don't have anything. So get on board and look at how you can collaborate, not what you're going to get out of something and what they're going to get. Go in with the right approach, with a collaborative approach, and use new media as part of that. Use influencers, use people working in digital to enable that strategy. The future here that I've seen and the future that will be coming to South Africa very soon is more with less. Everywhere in the world, be ready for a world of hybrid roles, music directors or music schedulers who are also doing workday shifts or night shifts. Content directors who are also doing weekend shifts. Those things are coming. Be ready for that and make sure you're multi-skilled. If you're not multi-skilled, you won't succeed. You've got to be able to do announcing or anchoring. You've got to be able to program a station. You've got to be able to produce, call screen, know how to do social media, become multi-skilled because that's where the world's going. Be ready for networking. It's happening around the world. National drive shows, national work days, automation on weekends or nights outside of 6 to 6. The cost pressures are coming, revenues are shrinking, and best you be ready for that and get ahead of it so that you're making those decisions and they're not made for you. And then lastly, I think using social media to drive your station and content, don't just use it as a way a radio person would use it. Tap into people who specialize in this. And the way that we specialize on radio, find people, and normally younger people in your markets that you can tap into, who can help you produce content that's sticky, that drive people to the radio station, but it's entertaining in itself. You only have 3 seconds. Make sure you're grabbing people and that your team is ready to work across formats, not just audio and radio. So that's my takeaway. That's where I'm at. Those are the things that are really sticking out for me around audience and ratings and revenue and teams. So, yep, thanks for the opportunity, Ravi. And if anyone wants to get hold of me, you can get hold of me on hello@stephenwerner.com, stephenwerner.com, and send me an email if you've got any questions or comments or you'd like to talk about anything. I'm always around, always available, and very, very passionate about radio and about media. So, yeah, thanks for the op and enjoy the conference.
Thanks, Stephen Werner, all the way from Adelaide. And what is interesting, just between chatting to people like Chris Fade and Grant and Stephen, and we all are coming at it from a different perspective, but we all landed at one common theme. And once again, it's to my first C, which is collaboration. Collaboration, in my view, in the South African landscape for radio, is going to unlock, I think, incredible opportunities, both from a content and a commercial perspective. And we've got to ready ourselves for it. And like Stephen said, instead of kind of waiting for things to happen, I think we need to be proactive in that space. So as an industry, and it will sort of segue into my last part of the last C, I think we got to have courage, right? Stephen speaks about being brave, and also these hybrid roles and hybrid thinking and kind of collaborative approaches, whether it be within an organization or media companies or radio groups altogether. I think we've got to have the courage to try things out. And with that comes, excellence, persistence, and also failure, right? And I think with courage means that we're going to have to try things. And I think particularly the appetite, I know, for risk is probably very low. So most content directors, program managers, station managers are likely to take the more cautious route because, number one, we probably don't have the time, we don't have the resources to do this. But I think, if anything, the time is now right to try some of this. So, with this means that we've got some kind of, let's call it new rules and kind of new engagement rules, which means that have the conversations, try things out, be prepared to fail fast. And, you might pick up half an idea out of this and half an idea there and could create something pretty cool. So that's my 5 C's, which I think, I'm not too sure if it's about the future of radio, or it's about galvanizing the power of radio. Between all of the gentlemen on the call today, they all spoke about the fundamentals and the basics, and I think that still holds true in a large degree. And they also spoke about the next, okay? And that's how do we freshen things up? How do we move into the next phase? So I hope you got value out of today. Happy to take any questions, but I think, once again, just to reiterate, I think the power of collaboration as an industry is key. I think talent development is essential for this industry. I've been having conversations with Nadia about, I know, the radio awards, which I think, in my view, as an independent person, needs a rethink and a refresh, because we need to motivate talent in this country to grow and develop, whether it's within their own organization or the industry. And we've got to position radio differently. So if we see it differently, right, and we have to position it differently to advertisers. Like I said, talking to some brands and some clients, they are not aware of the capabilities of what radio can offer, the different dimensions and an ability to drive response and results. So thank you for your time, and I hope you got value out of that, and I'm happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Very fascinating insights there. And I also just dropped a question in the chat box. Collaboration, connection, community, curiosity, and courage. So I just want to find out, you can just leave it via text in the chat box, which C resonates with you. And while we do that, any questions and comments you have for Ravi, you can go ahead. I also wanted to say, Ravi, that Grant's got me so fired up. I'm ready to get behind a microphone myself.
Please don't you love his energy, yeah?
Absolutely. That was an amazing presentation.
Yeah, cool.
I see Mzu says for him, connection is the most important C. Anybody else? We've got a comment from Philly. Great presentation, Ravi. Thank you for making us love radio more. Same from Minentle. Thanks, Ravi. So, Ravi, can I just hear from you then? What's your last word? What would you say you're looking forward to the most in as far as the future of radio goes?
Well, not to further harp on the point of collaboration, but I think consolidation and getting back to kind of the core fundamentals of what drives the power of radio. I think as an industry, and I know with obviously the Rams results, I know is taking shape in a new form, but I do think there has to be more. I think more communication between a lot of the. If I look at the Hall of Fame, and if I use Grant's kind of shout outs here. And I see a lot of people on this call, between seasoned, I think Nadia, nice way of putting it, calling people instead of calling them old, calling them seasoned, Nadia. A lot of a lot of people on the call that have obviously got experience and certainly tenure, but there's also a lot of young up and coming talent, and I think getting people to talk to each other, I think will just unlock a lot of potential. So that's what I'd like to see next. I think, the radio awards is one factor out of it, and it might just be an event, but I think we've got to create these kind of connection sessions to be able to talk to each other about cool ideas for radio.
Absolutely. And I see Minentle has a hand up. Hi, Minentle.
Morning, Offense. Morning, Ravi. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. It was cool. Grant actually did also energize me there as well. Thanks for that. I see that social media comes up quite a lot. Ravi, in the presentation, the guy spoke about it. I think with your three fellow presenters, they all raised something on social media, which is can be quite a cost when you look at it. So I just want to find out from you in terms of when we're looking at social media and on air, from your idea or advice, how should we actually eat up this elephant that is social media? I don't know if you get what I'm saying. Because there could be one approach to just all out go all in, but looking at the cost.
I think we lost
Oh,
Minentle
it's
there.
lost. Yeah, but I think I
Yeah.
got the gist of the question. So maybe I'll just attempt to start answering, and she'll probably get back onto the call. I think she's
Yeah,
back,
looks
right?
like she's back
Yeah.
with us now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Minentle, you did cut out, but I think I got the gist of your question. Or is there anything else you want to
Yeah.
add on?
No. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Ravi.
Yeah, listen. Thanks, Minentle. Good to chat to you. I think, listen, and here's I think the reality check with digital and social media and let's call it the platforms that I think you can get overexcited and over invest in it. And I think that's where your digital strategy has to come with your opportunity to win, both from a content perspective and from a commercial perspective. The reality is that the digital space is still a very small commercial driver for stations, right? So I think it's got to come with a sense of caution, but it's got to be also where you're prepared to put the investment in. So Minesh, from my perspective, I think you've got to look at it which are the shows, which are the pillars of the station that you're going to drive with digital and social and put it into that space, right? And I think you also got to pick the platforms in terms of what you're going to go after. Okay, so I think to the point I made, or I think even what it was Stephen made, which is try not to go and just have the spray and pray approach. So you've got to look at your content based on the platform that you're going to put it out there. But I would certainly drill down into which are the shows, it might be personalities, it might be content pillars that are going to give you the best opportunity to win and invest in that. Okay. I know a lot of stations end up going with producers and content across different shows and kind of just bolt them on. So I would go more kind of which are the shows that you're going to get the best response and result with and invest in those.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank
Thank you so
Ravi.
much, Ravi. I see a few more comments there. Nick and Dave both saying collaboration are important to them. And then Philly's also got his hand up. Philly, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the great presentation, Ravi and your other colleagues. Just one thing that I didn't hear much being talked about in the presentation is the usage of AI in the the radio presentation, whether it's in terms of programming, whether in terms of planning. How did you assess the influence of AI going forward, and what do you think could it be its impact in terms of the future of radio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I looked at firstly AI just in terms of the organizations that I kind of dealt with, and I think it's in that kind of innovation experimental space, right? And I can't remember which station it was in the UK that don't have a presenter on a weekend, and it's kind of positioned as an AI presenter. And I know it's been done, I think in the States and across many territories. I think it's a space to play in, all right? I guess in the same space as digital. I wouldn't be running to try and overinvest in it, but I think we're the natural ability to kind of use AI, and I think I did see it in one of the stations in Dubai where actually they do their clients commercials done with AI. Okay, so they use it from a commercial perspective. So I've seen a couple of case studies where one has been driven from a content perspective, some's been done from a commercial perspective. I don't think there's a kind of a set model on it, but I do think it's something that as an industry we need to start playing with in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot more active than what we are now.
Great. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, everyone. We're going to close off now because we know you've got businesses to run. But Ravi, this has been absolutely wonderful. The fact that you just prepared so well, those wonderful inserts, again, talks to your sheer love and passion for radio. We are so immensely grateful. To also say to our colleagues on the call, we keep saying we need to really use these platforms to engage, to share knowledge, etc., etc. So if you want to also participate, reach out to Fense. To also thank Fense and the NAB team, but really, Ravi, so much gratitude from our side. We look forward to wonderful things happening and definitely to strengthening the radio awards this year. Thanks for those 5 C's. I think you've got us thinking a hell of a lot, but today has really been wonderful. Such a lovely close off to February being all things radio. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Ravi. Thank you, everybody, for
Bye-bye.
joining.